Meet Me at the Crossroads by Megan Giddings is a horror-tinged portal fantasy following two sisters, right? Wrong. It is, in fact, an allegorical meditation on grief with, you guessed it, unpacking of religious trauma. Now, so far, other than Meet Me at the Crossroads, the only other Giddings I've read is her debut, Lakewood, which was horror-tinged and was following the history of informed consent, or more importantly, the lack thereof, for particularly Black people in America. And so I was expecting a kind of horror element to this, but I wasn't expecting the kind of horror of grief and detachment, which is what this really was. And I think it's really interesting in relation to the use of Giddings language, because in Lakewood I felt a kind of sense of distance and detachment from the narrative that was incredibly purposeful and was meant to kind of emulate that kind of out-of-body experience our character was going through. Here we have a similar kind of distance to the narrative that is reminiscent of the kind of dullness of grief and that real sense of detachment from the world, in some ways from grief, that kind of permeates the entire novel, even though we are not seeing the novel through the first person point of view of our character that is most directly, or we are following their exploration of grief most directly, I should say. And so here we are using the appearance of these doors to other worlds and the religions that pop up around these doors, including the religion that our protagonist Ayana was raised in, to explore and be a metaphor for grief in kind of a meta way sometimes as well, because we are watching the kind of establishment of religions around these doors and this kind of idea of what does this represent, and is it the afterlife on the other side of the door, and what does that mean? And so it's in very active conversation. At the same time, it's keeping us just a little bit distant, like the doors are distant for the characters in this book, and unknowable in the same way that what comes next is ultimately unknowable to us, despite what we may believe, depending on our religious associations. And so this is a very reflective novel because of this. It is a very slow moving novel, and sometimes it is unclear what the end is, other than it's going to be some culmination of the journey of grief. And by that measure, I think that it's something that you just kind of have to experience in the reading journey. But that being said, if you are looking for a narrative that is very plot forward, this may not be the book for you.